Schools School Board.
And hello, I am Crystal Brackey, representing Ridgefield Public Schools. Casey.
And Casey, proudly representing St. Louis Park Public Schools.
Keene.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrea Keene and I represent Wayzata Public Schools.
Dallas.
Hello everyone, I'm with Brooklyn Center Community Schools in number 286.
Coons.
Hello everyone, welcome to our new members and to our old members. I represent Orono Public Schools. My full name, Michelle Coons.
Marty.
Good evening everyone, I'm Heidi Marty. I represent the West Tonka Public Schools.
Mosqueda Jones.
Hi everybody, I'm Jackie Mosqueda Jones and I represent Osseo School District, Independent School District 279.
Neville.
Good evening, my name is Regina Neville and I represent Edina Public Schools.
Sam.
Hello everyone, Sam Sam, representing Robbinsville District 21.
Seidel.
Hi, Adam Seidel representing Eden Prairie District 272, and especially welcome to the two of you who will be just little tiny squares in my imagination until we meet again, or meet for the first time, for real.
Thank you. Welcome everyone, and thank you for your service. I'd also like to welcome our staff members who are present this evening, and I hope I have everyone accurate. But joining us this evening are staff members Tanya Allen, Michelle Axel, Ann Becker, Melissa Brodin, Radius Guess, May Hawkins, Kim Helgeson, Rachel Hicks, Superintendent Sandy Lewandowski, Ben McGrath, Chad Maxa, Monine Mgini, Elizabeth Lodge Rogers, Julie Torilla, John Voss, and Gloria Wilder. Are there any additional staff members I may have accidentally missed? All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm going to walk us through this evening's agenda. We will have audience opportunity to speak. We'll have our approval of the consent agenda. We do have a share of the success and recognition this evening. We'll have an audit report as part of our business services and labor relations report, a superintendent update, including a race and equity impact analysis presented by Radius Guess. There's no instructional report this evening. For board business, there was originally a closed session posted. This will now all be conducted as an open session. We'll conclude the evening with once around the table and adjournment. Are there any additions to the agenda? Hearing none, I move that we accept the agenda as presented. Is there a second?
Second, Heidi Marty.
Seconded by Heidi Marty. Thank you. Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Andreessen.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keene.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Coons.
Aye, sorry.
It's okay. Marty.
Aye.
Mosqueda Jones.
Yes.
Neville.
Yes.
Sam. I will try to come back to Sam momentarily. Seidel.
Yes.
Sam, can you hear us? There you are.
Yeah, sorry I was muted, yes.
That's okay, you're fine. Thank you.
Motion carries and the agenda is approved. At this time, we have the opportunity for audience members to address the board. We welcome communication from our community and ask that those who wish to address the board, please complete the request form that is posted on the District 287 website in the school board section. When members speak, we ask that you please state your name, the topic that you will be addressing, and make sure that all remarks are addressed to the school board as a whole. Any concerns will be shared. Any concerns that are shared are taken under advisement. There is no school board discussion or response at this time. Presentations are limited to 3 minutes. And this evening, we do have a parent who would like to address the board. And Chris Elrod, I would invite you to unmute and welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for being here, and go ahead, please.
Certainly. Again, my name is Chris Elrod. My son Austin, age 18, attends District 287, the South Educational Campus. So I'm speaking on his behalf. And the topic of what I would like to briefly talk about is the phased-in learning models that are currently being implemented by the district, and some significant concerns that my wife and I both share regarding the model design and the process by which they are being implemented. A little background: I am an educator of 25 years. I currently work in the Wayzata School District, where I work at Wayzata High School, and my wife also is an educator of 25 years. So our concerns not only are from a professional standpoint, but more significantly from the standpoint of a parent of a severely autistic 18-year-old son. I want to say straight off the bat that Juanine and Superintendent Lewandowski have gone to great lengths to listen to my concerns. I commend them wholeheartedly. I feel like I've been listened to when I talk to Ms. Lewandowski, and I want to express my appreciation for that in front of the board. I think that she's truly listened. That being said, she's but one person, and I feel duty bound to share my concerns. So I'd like to do that if you guys will allow me. First, I think that I feel like that the design of this plan is creating and administrating structurally inequities through the model design. We are making decisions on phases and those returning to campus not based on individual needs of students, as was done when the 1 day a week decisions were made, as was discussed in this board meeting last month. We are certainly not making these phased-in model decisions based upon the governor's his instructions in the emergency executive order of November, where he makes it very clear about the impact of COVID and distance learning on these severely impacted populations, and how they are to be in the front of the line as we consider the educational needs of students. But we're basing these decisions based upon age, and that is extremely arbitrary in my mind when we're talking about these students. I liken it to all of a sudden 100 kids show up into an emergency room with varying degrees of illness, from headache to heart attack. And they all sit down and they wait for care and they wait for care. And someone finally comes out and says, okay, we're willing to care for the kids whose last name are A through F. And everyone in the back is like, don't worry, we'll give you an aspirin. But A through F, come on. And so that's where my son is right now at the age of 18. He's a Z in that scenario. And he's sitting in the back of the emergency waiting room being offered aspirins. Meanwhile, A through F is getting to go. And so as a parent in this emergency room, I then ask, well, when will you see my son? And the answer is, we don't know. You'll just have to wait. I can't abide by that. These are some harsh inequities, and you're forcing students to unfairly bear the burden of what's going on in terms of the impact on their education. That's my first concern. My second concern is that member districts are far ahead of 287 in terms of how they are addressing learning models how they are implementing learning models, and how they are dealing with these most impacted students. My campus, Wayzata, I have personally sent emails to Chase Anderson thanking him for how he has put special education students at the front of the line. We've had students on our campus every single day this year, no matter what their setting. And starting on Tuesday, they will all be back again 5 days a week, where most of them have been 5 days a week anyway. And when I listen to the board meeting and I listen to people say, well, we're going to sit back and we're going to see what our member districts do. 287 are the leaders. They should be the leaders in this. They should be out front. We send our kids to you guys because you are the experts with innovative design and innovative teaching. You have our most severe and most fragile kids, and we're sitting back watching what other people are doing. We shouldn't be waiting on member districts. We should be ahead leading the charge. And the last thing that I want to bring to the attention of the board, and I apologize if I'm going over the allotted time, you can tell I'm passionate about this, is a sense of urgency. I watched the video of the last board meeting, and quite honestly, I apologize, but I wanted to it was so frustrating. I wanted to rip my hair out because this is what I heard. We're considering, we're looking at, we're waiting to see. We talked about an MDE guidance that was issued in early fall. Well, we're looking at that. And when I hear we're considering and we're looking as the parent of an 18-year-old, this is what I hear. Tick, 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 tick. And we don't even have a sense of urgency to have a phase 3 plan. And no one can articulate one. And I just find that as an educator troubling, and I find it as a parent of an 18-year-old unacceptable. And yesterday, just to put it in perspective, my son spent his 12th day in class since March 13th. His 12th day. That should stop every one of you cold in your tracks. And we understood in spring, as a teacher especially, in the spring, everyone bore this burden and shouldered this burden equally. And that it was what it was. And that was okay. But since the beginning of 2020-21, that's no longer the case. Member districts are ahead of you guys. Member districts are focusing on kids. They know. The governor has released guidance. He did it months ago. He knows. No one can argue about the impact on these kids that distance learning has. I liken it to if I picked up 1, 2, or 3 of you and just all of a sudden plopped you down in Houston, Texas at the Johnson Space Center and said, okay, here you go. Launch the space shuttle. Make sure they're out there for 12 days. Come back and land it safely. And that's the expectation upon you. That's what you're asking your teachers to do. They can't do it. That's what you're asking my son to do by sitting in front of a computer when other students are going back 5 days a week. And no one has a plan. And he is, last name letter Z, as an 18-year-old, sitting in the back of the waiting room, being given aspirin, and we are parents saying, when are you going to see our kid? And all we've heard is, you'll just have to wait. I appreciate you listening to me. I'm imploring upon you guys, whoever is in the leadership position, to make these decisions, to completely reevaluate the model that you're using. You're using age. You might as well be using eye color. You might as well be using choose it. That's how arbitrary it is. The impact on families is profound. And when others are doing something about it, we should be doing something about it too. I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Elrod. We appreciate you sharing your personal story this evening. We also appreciate your patience through the organizational meeting. It's a longer wait than usual to be able to present. So thank you very much.
It was educational. I appreciate it. I won't be signing up for school board anytime soon.
No.
Bless you people.
We appreciate you as an educator as well. So
Yeah,
thank you very much.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. All right, next, Juanine, I do want to check in. Have there been any additional requests for audience members to address the board?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We will continue with approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda for separate consideration? Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
I so move. It's Andrea Keene.
Second.
Moved by Andrea Keene. Second?
Second.
Seconded by Sam Sant. Is there any discussion? Crystal, would you please approve or call the roll?
Andreessen.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keene.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Coons.
Thought it was off. Aye. So sorry.
Marty. Aye. Mosqueda Jones.
Yes.
Neville.
Yes.
Sant.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next is share the success and recognition. This one is fun. I am really pleased to recognize our board member, Andrea Keene, as the recipient of the Minnesota School Board Association All-State School Board Award. And Andrea waved just so we all know who you are. There we go. So I'm just going to share a little bit of background. Yeah, we can do some definite, some waves, claps, because this is a cool thing. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. The Minnesota School Board Association, also known as MSBA, has several different honors and recognitions. Their top honor is the one that Andrea is receiving, which is election to the Minnesota All-State School Board. This recognizes the high standards of school board leadership, including advocating for students, good governance, and setting the example for board ethics. A couple of comments that were shared in the presentation of this award to Andrea earlier, which I understand was a surprise. Am I right? This was coordinated by MSBA and your family. So very cool. Comments were shared that Andrea sets the example of respect and civil leadership, even during a time of a pandemic, that she is a good listener and communicator with her community. And I would concur that those are all of the things that I have observed during the time that we've had to work with Andrea. So Andrea is currently the chair of the Wayzata School Board, and we are proud to have her as a member of Intermediate District 287 School Board as well. So congratulations, Andrea.
Thank you, Regina. Thanks,
any
everyone.
Comments? I would invite you to share a couple of comments.
No, I have no comments other than thank you for the acknowledgement. I appreciate it.
Okay, well, you're welcome. Congratulations. We are going to move on with our Business Services and Labor Relations report. And I'd like to welcome Jim Eichten from MMKR to present the summary of the fiscal year 2020 audit. And at the end of the presentation, the board will be asked for action to accept the audit. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you for having me this evening. I'm here this evening, members of the board, to provide a brief summary of the audit results for the year ended June 30th, 2020. I did have an opportunity back in December to go through these documents as well as the audit results with members of the board. And the administration, along with their support, did approve the audit back at that time. And I come here this evening to, as the chairman suggested, just to receive an acceptance of the final results. And so I'm going to share my screen if that's even possible. It is. Excellent. So you'll see, I'll give it a second. My PowerPoint on the screen, I believe. So first of all, the point of the presentation this evening is to give an approval or acceptance of the financial statements and the audit results. So it is a requirement in state law that the intermediate district prepare an annual financial statement. That annual financial statement was provided to you in the board packet this evening. It is the role of the auditor to provide an opinion on that financial statement. As part of the audit process, which is guided by federal regulations, we also are required to issue opinions on your internal controls, specifically to financial reporting, and your compliance with various laws and regulations that relate to financial reporting. This year, due to the district receiving more than $750,000 of federal revenues, the district did complete what's called a single audit of federal awards. Those particular standards are guided by the Office of Management and Budget at the federal level. So we issue opinions on your schedule of federal awards. We issue an opinion on the internal controls specific to those federal award programs. And then we issue an opinion on your compliance with the requirements of the individual major programs that we audited. This year, as part of the rotating process of a single audit, we issued opinions on the major programs over the food service program, the summer food service program, as well as a literacy development grant that the district received. In my presentation, I do provide information on the management report. A management report is a document that our firm issues to summarize the audit and provide any required communications, as well as to provide information on the financial results of the district for the year. So in that management report, you'll see a summary. First of all, I want to point out we did issue what's called an unmodified, better described as a clean opinion on that financial statement that was required to be prepared. It was the opinion you were looking for going into the audit process, so certainly a positive result in that regard. In that opinion, we did provide an emphasis of a matter. This particular year, we implemented a governmental accounting standard, GASB Statement 84, on fiduciary activities. There were some redefinitions of some fund types this year that caused the district to establish what's called a custodial fund, as well as change the accounting of the flexible benefit plans. Again, all required by GASB Statement 84. It isn't really an exception in your audit report, but it is an emphasis of a matter that the board should be aware of. As you can see in my PowerPoint, we did issue all of those opinions and did not have any findings to report. Certainly an exceptional audit standard and exceptional results this particular year. Having no findings is certainly not something that you should take lightly. A lot of work and a lot of effort goes into these audits, and the district should be commended again this year for having no findings to report. In my management report, we also then provide information on the financial results, which is really the second part of any audit. We do provide information in the document on, first of all, fund balances as a percentage of expenditures. This is a very typical percentage that is used by the state of Minnesota, the Minnesota Department of Education, as well as most districts in identifying the levels of equity they have in their own organizations. You can see on the PowerPoint that the light blue is the statewide percentages, These percentages have flattened out at around 20% of fund balance. As you can see, it's unchanged for the last several years, albeit that particular flat change probably is going to change as we look to 2020 and 2021, given the environment that we're in with COVID-19. You'll probably see some fluctuations as we move forward into the future. The intermediate district, which is I guess it's green line, has seen very stable fund balances percentages. You can see very little change over the last decade, with slight increases over the last 3 years, which were mostly planned as part of financial operations. You can see here, this is the graph that shows general fund financial position specifically for the district. You can see that the unassigned fund balance has been consistent over the last few years with a slight increase. But certainly the point of this graph is to really show the stability of the equity position of the district. Cash and investments do fluctuate from one year to the next, even though fund balance is changing. And really that emphasizes the need for fund balance. The cash balances of the district tend to be up and down based on cash flow and based on requirements at the NDE level. And so the need for fund balance is certainly appropriate at the district. So in my report, we also provide information on various categories of fund balance. You can see all the various categories that the intermediate has here. One to focus your attention on is the unassigned balance. Typically, the district utilizes that particular amount, and the ratio of expenditures in its planning and in its guidance to the board. In particular, the unassigned fund balance you can see here ended the year at about 9.8%. The district does have a policy in place that endeavors to maintain a balance of between 6 to 8%. So as you can see there, that all the 3 years presented were slightly above that averages, as you can see, but certainly showing very stable fund balance environment. Here, I do provide information on the cash flow of the district, and I bring this to your attention and put this graph on the PowerPoint, really to show the amount of change that goes into the cash balances each and every year. You can see that for the 3 years presented, the cash flow of the district is very consistent and really is guided much by the MDE's cash flow requirements. But you can see even in this graph, the cash flow balances get quite low, not significantly low, but they get low. And though that really just emphasizes the need for equity position to, in essence, fund the organization throughout the year. In my presentation, in my documents, we also give a breakdown of the various accounts the district has. As I mentioned, the stability of the overall fund balance. This past year, the district did project a decrease in fund balance in its budget about $600,000. The actual results were about 3.4 million higher than the budgeted amounts. And most of the accounts you see here did have positive operating results. This particular account, the special ed account, experienced positive results. As you can see, the increased fund balance was about 1.6 million, which was about $1.5 million more than what was projected in the budget. Most of that had to do with expenditures being less than budgeted for the year, mainly in the area of salaries and benefits due to open positions, as well as severance and health benefit costs being lower than anticipated. Nothing concerning to that regard, but just providing information as to the results. You're also seeing in this particular graph the increase in the overall operations, but overall very stable environment for the special education area. The district does have also a career technical education account. You can see the excess fund balances over the last several years, and in this particular year was very consistent to the budgeted results that was put forth to the board. The district also has an academic account. You can see here that the overall financial position was increasing from about $500,000, which was above what was anticipated in the budget, mostly due to the online learning amounts due to the growth in the Northern Star online program. The district, that particular program, had very positive results this past year due to growth in student participation, which is driving some of those particular results. And then lastly, the district has a district-wide account, which again, all had very positive increases in fund balance, as did most of the accounts. But most of the differences were related to lower than expected expenditures, specifically in the area of capital purchase services and salaries and benefits, a lot of which related to the pandemic and some of the closure of those particular facilities, or even just programming or capital projects that occurred that might not have occurred due to the pandemic. So overall, I did want to reflect as well on this topic, and I say this at almost all of my presentations. One of the reasons that I bring it up as it relates to these particular items is the idea that the audit results are a reflection of several months ago, and we want to share as part of my presentation that these audit results actually reflect very closely to what was budgeted or expected at the district. And that's a comment that I make only because the district and its board are making decisions continually on that budget. And if the audit holds true to those budgets, that leads to good decision making as part of the board. And we continually see that in these audit results, at least for the last several years, if not going back farther than that, in the actual results of the audit. So very positive results overall when it comes to the financial position of the district. So in summary, I did issue a clean opinion on the district's financial statements. We had no findings to report on the single audit of federal awards this particular year. We had no findings overall, which is certainly commendable. We continue to see very stable financial position at the district, including the financial results of the year being close to budgeted expectations. And lastly, I want to point out that this audit goes very smoothly. The staff at the district does an excellent job of financial record keeping. In this particular audit summary can be highlighted by that. A very positive audit results overall. So I'll stop sharing my screen, assuming I can find my mouse. Let's see if I can. There it is. So with that, very positive results, and I'll open it up to any questions that you might have for me.
Well, thank you, Jim. And I also want to express great thanks and gratitude to May Hawkins and Gloria Wilder, who are representing the financial team this evening. Thank you to you and to all of your team for your consistent and excellent work. Are there any questions or comments regarding the audit? Okay, this is, I take that silence as applause because that is extremely well done. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Jim, to you and to your team at MMKR. This is an action item this evening. Is there a motion to accept the fiscal year 2020 audit as presented?
So this is Andrea Keene, second.
Moved by Sam Sant and seconded by Andrea Keene. Is there any discussion? I invite board members to unmute as Crystal calls the roll.
Andreessen.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keene.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Kuntz.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Mosqueda Jones.
Yes.
Neville.
Yes.
Sant.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Jim, and I wish you well in the year ahead, and thank you, May and Gloria.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is number 7, the Superintendent's Report. This evening, we have a 287 Racial Equity Impact Analysis, and I'd like to welcome Radius guests.
Hello, everyone. I would just like to say good evening, Madam Chair, 287 board members, and my fellow 287 colleagues. I've been given the opportunity to introduce to you a tool that we are using here in District 287. And so right now, if you'll give me a minute, I'm going to prepare my screen so that I can share some slides with you. So what I have is 287's Racial Equity Impact Analysis Tool. It is a tool that we are using widely across the district and thought it would be a great idea and opportunity to share this tool with you. So today's takeaway is that I'm hoping that you will gain an understanding of the Racial Equity Impact Analysis Tool, that you will consider how a tool like this can be used, that you'll explore the challenges that may arise when using the tool and get inspired by the ways that you could use this tool. But ultimately, my learning intention is that you will keep race front and center and prompt leaders, individuals, and teams to examine how BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and low-wealth communities may be affected by an action or a decision. I would like for you to know that the tool has 3 parts. Part 1 is the discussion, where you use some guiding questions to facilitate a racial equity discussion. Secondly is analyze, where there are only 4 equity impact analysis questions that you respond to. And then lastly is reflect. Reflect and recognize your own racial bias, as well as the presence and role of whiteness. So those are the 3 parts to the tool. So the first is discuss, and here you use guiding questions to facilitate a racial equity discussion. Are there multiple perspectives involved in the planning? Are participants diverse by race and position? Were the groups most impacted by the discussion and by the decision included in the discussion? In what ways are we maintaining status quo or advancing racial equity? What could be done differently or better to support or advance racial equity efforts? Who benefits? Who is advantaged? Who is disadvantaged? In what ways and what decisions are they based on the majority or those of the minority, those in the margins? In what ways does color blindness exist? The idea that ignoring or overlooking racial and ethnic differences promotes racial harmony. How do you know the audience is communicated to in ways that makes sense through their lens? And in what ways are other marginalized groups impacted? So these are some of the discussion questions that you might have. Now it's time to analyze. And again, I indicated that there are 4 questions. The first one is, again, who participated in this analysis? What are the racial equity impacts of this action or the decision? The third question is, who will benefit and or be burdened by this action or decision? And then last, are there strategies to mitigate any unintended consequences of this decision? And the third part of this process is to reflect. Oftentimes, the reflection occurs on your own. It occurs through some journaling that you might do. You reflect and recognize your own racial bias, as well as the presence and role of whiteness. In our district, we use something called the compass. It was created by Glenn Singleton, and he uses it in Courageous Conversations. So we ask that you place yourself on the compass and think about what feelings came up for you during the discussion. When you think about that compass, there's 4 quadrants. One of the quadrants is a believing quadrant. And here you enter the conversation about race focused on what you believe is right or wrong. There's a thinking quadrant, and there you enter the conversation thinking about the conversation at hand, and at times it may take you a little longer to speak because you're thinking through what you're going to say. Another quadrant of the compass is feeling, and here you enter the conversation with your emotion near the front. And then the last quadrant of the compass is you enter the conversation wanting to jump to a plan of action. A second area of reflection is the role of race. What role did race experiences or bias have in the conversation? And then the last one is whiteness. What aspects of whiteness showed up for you or were observed in others? Whiteness. Whiteness itself refers to the specific dimensions of racism that serve to elevate white people over BIPOC communities. Whiteness is dynamic, it's relational and operational at times and on a myriad of levels. These processes and practices include basic rights, values, beliefs, perspectives, and experiences purported to be commonly shared by all, but which are actually and consistently afforded to white people. So you might be asking yourself, because I would if I were you, why use a racial equity tool? The persistence of deep racial disparities and divisions across society is evidence of institutional racism. Racial equity impact analysis tools are used to reduce, eliminate, and prevent racial discrimination and inequities. When racial equity is not consistently addressed, racial inequality is unconsciously replicated. Racial equity impact analysis tool is a systemic examination of how different racial and ethnic groups will likely be affected by a proposed action or decision. It is used to minimize unanticipated adverse consequences in a variety of contexts, including the analysis of proposed policies, procedures, programs, plans, and procedures, protocols. It's a vital tool for preventing institutional racism and for identifying new options to remedy long-standing inequities. When do you use it? These tools are best conducted during the decision-making process or prior to enacting new proposals. They're used to inform decisions, much like social justice impact statements, fiscal impact reports, workplace risk assessments, and most recently, in COVID-19 decisions in returning to school. Where are they used? Many places. Race Forward, the Government Alliance for Race Equity, the League of Minnesota Cities, Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, Minneapolis Public Schools, St. Paul Public Schools, and Intermediate District 287. Racial equity impact analysis tools in the United States are relatively new and still somewhat limited, but new interest and initiatives are on the rise. I'm happy to say that the United Kingdom has been using racial equity impact analysis with success for nearly a decade. I'd like now just to kind of close and invite you as well as my colleagues, 287, to respond to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Radius. I'm so grateful for the continued race and equity work that is happening at 287 and specifically for your leadership and for presenting a specific tool to just guide us along. I would invite any questions or comments for Radius. Sandy.
Madam Chair, board members, I'd just like to add my appreciation to Radius for many things, but for bringing us this tools. In a relatively short amount of time, we have really started as leaders using this tool in many of our discussions. And I, for one, am impacted by how quickly it starts shifting the conversation. It also is something that when we didn't have this tool, we would just start a conversation and get all the way to the end and not have taken some of these questions into mind. This really forces an intentionality that is already starting to change conversations in our districts. We're just starting to use it further out in programs, and again, I'm pleased to see staff grabbing onto it and seeing the power that the tool has to broaden conversation and ultimately to come up with better decisions that reflect all of our kids and not just some of our kids. So I'm appreciative of Radius for bringing it to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Additional questions or comments? Heidi, go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you. Radius, at our district, we're just starting to get into some diversity, equity, inclusion talk, and I'd love to be able to incorporate some of this language of this tool. So if you could share any of this with us, I would greatly appreciate it.
Dr. Marty, I'm happy to do that. We actually just recently put together a worksheet that many of the staff across the district are using along with the actual tool. And it's a lot easier to be able to document and hold yourself accountable. And so I'm happy to share that with the board.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments? Yes. Go ahead. Sorry, I'm trying to unmute my own self. Jackie, go ahead, please.
Jackie. Yes, please feel free to call me Jackie instead of my last name at any point.
Okay.
I even go by Miss Jackie as a teacher. Radius, I just want to thank you for your work. And in ASIO, we are trying to level up, let's just say, and do a lot of this work. And so sharing that worksheet will be a very helpful, easy tool to give to our staff so that we can truly break down some barriers. And I just, I'm so excited to be here and hear the work that you all are doing. So thank you.
My pleasure. Happy to share.
Sam Sant. Sam, go ahead, please.
Ms. Guest, can you give us an update, please, on the training you're giving the staff, and also if you could go into depth as far as their responses to the training and how they're using it, I guess, with their work with children, and if they're utilizing any unconscious biases they're having with kids of color.
Absolutely. Perfect question. Thank you, Director Sand. I am very busy. I promise you. We are doing a lot in this district along the lines of race equity. We have put in place several communities of practice across the organization. One of our communities of practice is being led by an external consultant, which is Resma Menicum, who is an author. His book is My Grandmother's Hands. And so I have about 115 staff that are participating in a year of learning with RESMA. There are 5 board members that are participating in that training along with staff. So we have that going on. We have affinity spaces that we are using for conversations around race. So my white body colleagues have the days that they meet with RESMA, and my BIPOC bodies have the days that they meet with RESMA, and then we have the days that we have mixed bodies coming together for some really intense conversations around race. So that's one community of practice that we have taking place right now across the district. Another one is our equity teams. We have about 8 equity teams across the district, each one of our building sites. has an equity team as well as many departments. There's an HR equity team, there's a finance equity team. So they are also involved in a lot of the race equity work across the district. We have a curriculum that we are using to guide our conversations. There's some amazing TED Talks that we've incorporated into our training and YouTube videos, lots of article sharing and reading and processing and reflecting and journaling. That's going on. And then we have our professional development days that I'm collaborating with teaching and learning to provide some in-service training for staff across the district, for our licensed staff as well as our non-licensed staff as well. So most recently, just led some great conversations on unconscious bias. We visited the implicit bias organization so that staff could select an area of implicit bias and take a deeper dive, and they did that. It's called Project Implicit Bias. That's what it's called. And so there are so many different ways to step into implicit bias. They were very surprised that apartments hunting is there's a bias associated with that. You know, colorism, the bias associated with that. So staff chose an area of bias that they wanted to know a little bit more about. I led 3 implicit bias sessions for staff. I've done a lot of work with staff to assist them in preparing for the conversations about race that many students across our district are being exposed to from the media. You know, the civil unrest that is currently taking place in our community, nation, and world, and trying to make sure that our staff have the skills so that they can support students where they are. And so we've come up with a really nice addition to our website where we're identifying some tools and resources that our teachers can use. So there's great articles, there's podcasts, there's some social media out there that I've suggested that they may be interested in following, great articles, books to purchase. So those are the kinds of things, Director Smith, that we're doing across the district for our staff.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And we have a question waiting from Ann Casey, and then we will go back to Jackie Mosqueda-Jones. So Ann, go ahead, please.
I don't know if this is a question or I think it's a challenge. I think it's to say I'm one of the 5 board members that is participating in the Year of Learning, and as a white woman, I have already noticed that my muscles are growing, and I know that I have a lot more muscles to build by the end of this Year of Learning, but only, I guess, about 3 months in, I've really noticed that already. And I guess I want to challenge us on this board to not only say we should bring this tool, it's a great tool, back to our districts and share it with our staff, but also to expect each other and ourselves to use it as well. So I guess I would like all of us to think about how we, as individuals, can do that, but then how we can operationalize that, to use your word, Radius, as a board.
Thank you, Ann. And back to Jackie Mosqueda-Jones. Jackie, go ahead, please.
Thank you for indulging me again. As you were talking again about working with the staff, and I heard you say even non-licensed staff, which should be a given in my personal opinion. It reminds me that we have some events that are probably coming up that our students will have trauma around, specifically around protests that are being planned that last Wednesday turned into an insurrection. And I'm just curious what this district is kind of preparing for in dealing with the trauma that will, or trauma triggers that will happen after that, to give space to our students to go through that, and then our students that aren't able to articulate it or know what's going on in their bodies, how do we help? Do we have a plan to help, mitigate some of that?
Sandy, would you like to begin addressing that question?
Certainly, and I'd invite Tanya or Radius or anyone of the staff to chime in here as well. I think you ask a perfect question. We need our students to be talking and to be heard all the time, but especially in times of that we're living right now. And for example, after the event last Wednesday, we did provide staff with resources. Many of the teachers and social workers were involved in conversations with students, with each other. And so there was ample opportunity for students to be able to discuss this and work through some of their emotions about it. Similarly, next week, we're fortunate that we have a lot of staff trained in trauma-informed practices, and many social workers and staff who are very good at opening those conversations. So we feel like we have a running way to interact with the students after such events. Unfortunately, we've had a number of events to react to over time this last year. And I think it's fair to say that our kids everywhere are watching and have been impacted by various ways with the trauma that they've experienced. And it's our job as adults to help them process that. It's also our responsibility as adults in education, I believe, and leaders in education to speak out loud about this. We cannot change things if we don't talk about these topics, and so our intent as a district is to give voice to those discussions. Tanya or Radius?
Yes, I can also respond. I would say that one of the things that we have currently we've been doing this, as Sandy mentioned, for quite a while. We've been doing a variety of different trauma trainings. We had staff start the year because of summer even with Trauma 101. And then we've been adding on to different trainings. As a matter of fact, I trained Local 284, which is our more of our administrative support in buildings, because oftentimes, as you mentioned, we sometimes don't think about those other individuals that are coming in contact with families and students. And so a number of them, we did a training today, and I changed the training to respond to what happened last week. And that's been what we've been adapting to. We have district mobile response team members that are clinical professionals that are available and accessible. And we've also reached out to an individual who is actually a retired employee who helps with supervision for some of our individuals. Will also be on deck for 4 hours on Inauguration Day, as we anticipate just with not just only our students, but even our staff being impacted should things occur or anything like that. So we've been gearing up for that. And then another presentation that was developed has not gone out to all staff, but it has gone out to quite a few staff that reached out that just wanted to dive in deeper. And Radius's area is really racial equity, and then you've got the trauma piece, and so I take on the mental health pieces of it. We've started a training around healing-centered engagement, and it's a really deep training. You really have to be ready for that training, but it's something that's been developed. So I've been learning and gleaning from Radius and also just from the work, mental health work and trauma work we've already had with Dr. Bruce Perry, and really been matching work together to really build up our staff. So I do think that we're ready to respond. We don't know what to expect, but I do think we have really worked towards a level of readiness with staff around trauma and the impact, and being really specific and calling out what's happening in real time as much as we can. So we've been having those ongoing conversations.
I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Ruthie, go ahead, please.
I just want to say thank you, Radius. You're doing a great job. Wonderful work. I tell you, it just gets more exciting each time you present. I was just curious, how did you, you indicate there were several teams formed, equity team. teams? Were those on a voluntary basis, or how did you go about getting the teams formed?
I have to be perfectly honest, Director Dallas, those equity teams were put in place before I arrived. And so it is voluntary. Every single site across the district has an equity team, and the staff that participate on the equity team are there because they want to be a part of a deeper dive in race equity. They're there to learn. They want to experience comfort, discomfort. They want to speak their truth. They want to be engaged. They want to understand. They want to have this conversation with their colleagues and with their family members. So for them, it's a personal journey that they are all on to better understand what's happening in our community, nation, and world. So everyone that participates on an equity team is there because they want to be there.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? It's important work, and I'm just grateful that this is central to the work. So I know that we'll continue to have more updates, and thank you, Radius. Welcome every meeting, so thank you. So we're going to move on to board business on the agenda. And the first item here, we had originally scheduled a closed session. We're not going to do a closed session this evening, but we are going to address a transition. And I'm just pausing here because it's really tough to find the words on this one. But I'm going to invite Sandy Lewandowski, our superintendent, our past superintendent of the year with many of their accolades, and our leader of 15 years for Intermediate District 287, to share some of the news that she has with the decision that she has come to. So Sandy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, and colleagues. I was thinking as I prepared for this moment about starting as a student teacher, and that was a few decades ago. But I surely never thought at the end of my career I'd be sitting here in front of the board of Intermediate District 287. But everything that occurred after I got to District 287 has been just a job of a lifetime. I could not be more grateful for all the years that I've had the opportunity to work with students and staff and board members and member districts. It truly has been a job and a career that I have found extraordinarily purposeful. And I think as you get to near the end of one's career, you realize just how very important and sometimes unusual it is to have that sense of purpose. And that has continued every single moment I've been in this district. But there is a time, as one of my colleagues said when he retired, that you want to move just to a little slower lane, let's just say, and that time has come for me. And with that in mind, I have submitted my letter of retirement to the board with a great deal of gratitude, as I said. So thank you very much. I appreciate every one of you, and I look forward to some remaining time to work with you. But right now, I just wanted to share that decision with you, and certainly open to further discussion, but thank you very much.
Okay, I want to pause here for just a moment because this is 15 years of service. I'm going to try this. This is just an exercise. Standing ovation. I'm just standing up at my desk, and I invite anyone else who can stand and stretch and just lean down. This is big applause. This is for you, Sandy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I didn't I didn't understand that there was a way to do that.
I don't know, but we're going to try this. Thank you. My first response to you is gratitude. Just total gratitude on behalf of the board. And this is parts of the take care of, but there's the first thing to do is say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You have, in the time I've I have had the pleasure of being a part of this community for 8 years, and in that time, and I know preceding that, you lead with our students in mind. They are at the center of your mission, and you care about them and their education and their lives forward. You have developed an outstanding team of educators. The people that you have drawn to this work with you make a difference. So you have led them, and in turn, I have had the honor of learning from all of them just how deeply education impacts everyone's lives and how much the innovation makes a difference. And this is just phenomenal. I also want to call out the fact that you are leading a district for whom race and equity is central to our work, and being trauma sensitive. This is who we are. So just as we move forward, we don't know exactly what shape this will take yet. This is our opportunity as a board to figure that out. But race and equity and being a trauma sensitive school district are center to this work. So that's how we're beginning this journey of transition in honor of you and the legacy that you have created, and knowing what is central to how we need to move forward. So there's a couple of things. One, we will be moving forward with ways to celebrate your term at 287 and to have opportunities for recognition and just lengthier accolades. So that we will shape that moving forward. But two, I do want to make a recommendation to the board for action this evening toward this end. You have generously offered that the board may consider your retirement date of June 30th of 2021 or June 30th of 2022. And I would like to make a recommendation to the school board that we accept your retirement with a date of June 30th of 2022. So I would make that motion and ask for a second.
Second, Michelle Kuntz.
Seconded by Michelle Kuntz. And is there any discussion prior to taking action on that motion? Adam Seidel.
I'm just confirming that is Sandy's request as well.
And yes, Sandy, could you please speak to that for a moment?
Yes, thank you. When I discussed this with board chair, our discussion led us to two options, and with the approval of the board, I'm comfortable with either one. As you can guess, when you work this long over a district, you have some ambiguity about leaving, and so this gives, if it's the second and the longer one till June 30th of 22 at a lesser FTE, it gives me a chance to continue some of those priorities that have been such a wonderful thing to work on. So yes.
And I do want to add a point of clarification, and thank you, Sam. I want to call on you as well. Just for people, the board received Sandy's letter, which outlined both dates, and also this request that if it is a June 30th, 2022 retirement date, her request to move to a 0.75 contract and the balance of those duties to be redistributed between her lead team. But Sam, go ahead, please.
That's what I was going to ask Chair Neville. In that second year, the year of superintendent university contract, then would we be looking for a new superintendent to take their place, and then the superintendent would be able to serve as a supporting role to help bring them up to speed and to help guide them. Is that kind of the premise, or?
That is possibly true, and I can't speak for all of that because we haven't shaped a transition opportunity yet. We don't know the breadth of a search team, transition. These are all things that we need to figure out. So it probably depends upon the nature of the search, when a candidate is identified, and the timeline on that transition. So I think the best that I could respond to that now is possibly, But certainly by having a 2022 retirement date, we have the benefit of almost a year and a half for the transition process, the search and the transition. Does that help answer your question?
It does, but that's something that I would say that that's something I support, being that we have a superintendent adjusting for another year at 75% equivalent, full time, that we utilize that time to find a new superintendent, giving us ample time to replace her and also possibly bring in them early for superintendent adjusting to help train them and to help with a smooth transition.
Thank you. And I recognize Michelle Coons and then Ruthie Dallas. So Michelle, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Regina. I'm going to indulge myself and tell you how much I've enjoyed working with Sandy as superintendent of this great district. And I was board chair when we selected Sandy for the job, and it's been an incredible ride. I have learned so much and continue to learn, and I congratulate you, Sandy. You've put up with a lot over the years, and you've given us a lot, and every time it's always been about the children, and that to me is what kept me on board too. Just to work with you, it's been really great, and your leadership, we have some fantastic staff. The way you are involved with the staff too is above and beyond. So I pardon, please, for my indulgence, but it had to be said. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you.
I'd like to recognize Ruthie Dallas, followed by Adam Seidel. So Ruthie, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Sandy, I just want to say it's been a pleasure working with you. I was following your work before I even came on board. I've just been impressed by all the work that you've been doing and continue to do. And I was thinking I would have a couple more years, working along with you, but I do understand. So thank you for everything. And is it my understanding that if you do extend the time, it would be 0.75 FTE that we'll be looking at, right? Not a full-time position.
That's correct.
That will be the recommendation, yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you, Ruthie. Appreciate it.
Adam, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'm not familiar with other instances of a 0.75 superintendent. Could you just describe a little bit what that transition process would look like? What it would look like for you, Sandy, on a day-to-day basis. If there's kind of other precedent for that, I'm just not familiar with exactly what that would look like.
I think I might begin with that a little bit, and then I'm going to invite Sandy to follow up. So it's a very good question, and I understand and respect the request for 0.75 because it does alleviate some of that day-to-day workload. I also know that we're fortunate to have quite a strong lead team. So the 0.75 would have the reduction of salary that goes with that, and then it would be the responsibility Sandy as our superintendent and her lead team to determine the distribution of duties so that there is no loss of coverage of the superintendent responsibilities in leading the district. But that's where I'll begin. And Sandy, what can you add to that?
I think the main thing that I could add would be that I would intend to set up a schedule that both is somewhat consistent, but also knowing that I'm at a stage in my personal life that I can be pretty flexible. Right now, my colleagues sitting at the table will probably tell you that I take calls even when I'm on vacation, and I probably would continue to do that. For me, that works in a way personally and professionally that I think has been successful, and I would continue doing that. I would look forward to trying to transition and help assist in any way over the months that we had someone in place, and I would do everything I could do to be flexible about my arrangements. But I think that the main thing for me that I was desiring was just probably a little bit less hours per week. So that's the best I can say at this time without any more specifics, Adam.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you. I know you just said that that's the most that you can provide now without specifics, and I definitely appreciate what you just said. I'm just again trying to get. Well, first, are you aware of any? Can you cite any other kind of examples of something like this happening and what it looks like?
In which regard, the part-time or the less than full-time, I should say, or the fact that it would be extended out over the next?
The less than full-time.
Okay. I personally can't cite anybody right at this time. I know that certainly across the state there have been times where there's been short-term or part-time appointments, but I can't cite anybody right now that's done that. I guess for us this would be a first, but I certainly would work to make that successful. But I don't have anyone to cite to you right now, Adam.
Okay, Regina, I just have one last question. I think it's for you actually. You have, and Sandy's mentioned this a couple of times too, or sort of implied that there's part of this is there's a transition process. Is it? Am I reading into it too much, or is it possible that could mean a new hire being in position, or whether it's internal or external, a bit earlier before Sandy is gone, and then there being kind of an overlap period that allows it to help with that transition? Is that what I'm reading into that as being possible, or?
I would say that at this point there are a lot of possibilities because the way that this is shaped is up to us as a board. This is what we will decide moving forward. And what I will suggest here, and Crystal, thank you for your patience because I will recognize you next. One of the recommendations I have is that the board, if the board is all right with this, then I don't want to mix up motions here, but if they're all right, I would like to introduce the option of the school board workshop on superintendent transition so that it gives us an opportunity as a group to make sure that we're clear on our options, on our responsibility, and have just more structure to guide us moving forward. And certainly if we agree that there can be a retirement of June 30th, 2022, we have the opportunity to reflect more on the process before us. So theoretically, what you're saying, Adam, yes, this is possible. We don't, of course, know exactly how we're going to shape the search. We don't know the candidates to be identified and if it will be possible for them to begin early. But theoretically, that overlap is possible. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Crystal, go ahead, please.
Sure. I think it builds on some of the questions that Adam was asking, which is just to acknowledge this is the very first step of so many decisions that need to be made. And it's difficult because we're both honoring just the importance of Sandy sharing that she is choosing to retire. And also, of course, immediately as a board, our mind goes to what is the body of work that is before us in terms of actually determining how to do this in a way that does justice to our charge, to our students and to our communities and to our staff. And so I just feel like we're all sitting with the complexity of that. And specifically for me, I just want to say, I can imagine that staff members might be feeling something along the lines of if Sandy's position is, going to be at a 75% and the work is going to be reallocated, what does that mean for staff members? Are we asking them to take on more without taking things off of their plate? And so just want to acknowledge that that is a valid concern. And that is something that we have to be addressing in this process. And so I think as we work with Sandy to, potentially extend her contract for one more year at the 75%, we need to get really clear about what that actually means and the implications of that for her and for others on the staff. And what are the right ways to involve staff in the process? Because I am hyper aware of the fact that as a board member, I have very limited insight into the day-to-day operations of the district and the impacts of this on the people who do work here every day. And so just really want to be thoughtful and intentional about these steps that we are taking to really make sure that we're thinking so deeply and clearly about what this could look like for our entire district next year. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share, in addition to just, again, extending my appreciation to Sandy and her thoughtfulness around approaching this as well.
Thank you, Crystal. Well said. Additional questions or comments? So what I'm going to ask for, and hopefully this is clear and acceptable to the board, but just a motion that we accept Sandy's retirement. My recommendation is for a date of June 30th, 2022. And that would mean that we would then pursue a contract for the 2021-22 school year at 0.75. And are there any questions or comments about that motion? So can someone remind me who was keeping better track than I was? Did we have a second to that motion? I don't believe so. No. So my motion, I'll just repeat this one other time. It's my motion that the board accept with gratitude Sandy's retirement as of June 30th, 2022, and that we begin the draft for a 2021-22 contract at 0.75. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Sam Sant. Is there any discussion? Crystal, I would invite you to please call the roll.
Andreessen.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keen.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Kuntz.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Mosqueda Jones.
Yes.
Neville.
Yes.
Sant.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Motion carries. Sandy, we are grateful to have you with us through June 30th of 2022, and anytime you want to stop by, beyond that. We will invite Ann Becker and to begin drafting a contract for the 21-22 school year. Your current contract is in place through June 30th of 2021, but the 21-22 contract to be at 0.75 time. And I would like to then, as I introduced earlier, I don't know that we need a motion for this necessarily. What I'd like to just get is a sense of, is the board, would the board like me to pursue an MSBA workshop for a superintendent transition? Any questions or comments about that? I'm getting a thumbs up. Great. So what I will do is, and Ruth, if you have a question, go ahead, please.
I'm just wondering, the workshop that you're proposing, will that happen before the contract is drawn up, or how are you looking at that?
That's a good question because I don't really know. I'm not sure how much time is needed to prepare the contract, and I don't know what the response will be on availability for timing on the workshop. But do you have a preference? Would you recommend that we consider one sense of timing or the other?
Well, I was thinking if we had the workshop, it might be good, a way of providing the input that we might need or want to have as the contract is drawn up.
Thank you. That is helpful. What I'll do, I think there's value in just having that workshop sooner rather than later, because it gives us more information. I recognize that each of us in our member districts may or may not have had experience with the superintendent search, and even though there is Minnesota statute, which we need to first of all be mindful of the guidelines of statute, but recognizing that sometimes there are practices that vary just a little bit from district to district. So our goal is to become familiar with statute, our responsibility, and to have the same vocabulary moving forward as a District 287 board. Anne, go ahead, please.
I just want to support Ruthie's request, and I think also going back to Adam's question that MSBA is going to know precedents for less than full-time superintendents, which I know there have been throughout the state. There's lots of small districts that there have been small districts that have shared superintendents, and they would certainly be able to speak to some precedent there.
Thank you. That's helpful. Any additional questions or comments about pursuing an MSBA superintendent transition workshop? I'll see what kind of information I can find so I can bring that information back to the board with the goal of scheduling one sooner rather than later. Sam.
I have a separate question regarding the contract. Does there need to be created a board subcommittee then to negotiate this final year of the contract, or is this the current contract at the 0.75% full-time equivalent?
So thank you for the question. And Ann Becker, I'm going to invite you to weigh in on this. My understanding, and this may not be accurate, but my understanding is that there would not be a committee put in place to review the contract, that there would be a draft prepared, and the board would have the opportunity to review it and discuss it before acceptance. But Ann, can you provide some more clarification on the question?
I am happy to draft that contract for the board to review. I think Director Sant is asking whether there would be negotiations prior to the drafting of the contract. And that's not a question that I can answer.
Sandy, yes, thank you. Go ahead, Sandy.
I hope it's not inappropriate for me to weigh in here, but I would just suggest that the last two contracts have just been replications, including salary, of my one from 3 years ago. So basically, I've been operating on the same contract, same salary for the last 3 years, which has been my request. And well, I think there will be some short negotiations. I think this will be a fairly simple request on my part. So I'm certainly open to negotiations, but don't expect it to be very challenging.
Sam, is that helpful?
So then my question then is that, if there's some negotiations, who is negotiating with the superintendent?
And so I don't know that we have, well, I guess I can speak from the past couple of contracts as I have been chair. We haven't had negotiations. The draft has been shared with the board, so all of us received the proposal at the same time, and then any discussion would take place at the board meeting. Crystal, can you add to that?
I'm just thinking back to the last time, or maybe it was my first experience. It was the board chair who was in the position of directly working with the superintendent and sharing the proposed contract with the board.
Thank you. And Adam, did you want to make a comment on that issue? Okay, thank you. So and again, if this is all right, I will continue to remain in conversation with Sandy. However, there would not be any approval until the board has had an opportunity to review the draft and ask questions. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Adam?
Yeah, I would be of interest in having starting the process of what this a 0.75 transition period looks like built into the contract. Crystal articulated really well some of the issues around that. I think there's just more, and just I know I would feel more comfortable if there was some discussion around what that would look like, just so we can start putting some structure around it, and go from there.
And to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, are you referring to board discussion in advance of a draft of a contract, or a draft of a contract as a starting point to give a structure to respond to?
I'm not sure what process this board wants to use to do that. In 272, we have our negotiations committee that sits in on some of our union negotiations, and that committee actually is the one that goes and runs point on negotiating contracts with superintendents. We could talk about it as a board. We could talk about it in the workshop. I don't know what the timeline needs to be to have this contract done and approved. Maybe we could go through that. So if we have time to just talk about it as a board coming back, we could do that. But if we don't have time, I don't know. So, but I know, and I can't speak for the board, I would just feel more comfortable if there was something like that in place in writing in the contract.
Describing, and to make sure I'm clear, describing some language in the contract that addresses the 0.75, how the duties are redistributed and so forth. I think it is helpful for the board to be aware of that. The distribution of duties, I see as the purview of management. So how that is determined would be Sandy's discussion with the lead team, but certainly it is the responsibility of the board to make sure that all of the superintendent's duties are covered. So there is a balance between those two. Anne?
I just wanted to make clear that discussions of that nature shouldn't take place during the workshop. They should take place in an open session in the board meeting.
Correct. Thank you very much. So at this point, just again to make some separation and clarity on topics that we're discussing, I am hearing approval from the board that they'd like me to review an MSBA workshop on superintendent transition to happen as soon as possible. So I will bring some information back to the board on that topic. Hopefully I will have at least something to report before our meeting on January 28th. Second, in terms of moving forward with the contract, we're not, approving the contract is, would the board be comfortable with Anne beginning a draft of a contract and having me in the role of board chair being a point person for discussions with Sandy as superintendent, and then bringing a draft back to the board for review? Or is there another structure that the board would prefer? So I'm seeing general agreement in this direction. And if anybody does have another proposal, I just want to pause for a moment. If anyone would like to propose a different scenario, I would ask that you please share that preference at this point. Thank you. So I'm going to ask Anne if you could please begin working on a draft contract, and I will remain in communication with Sandy, and I'm sure with Anne. Our timeline, the current contract for Sandy expires June 30th of 2021. So technically that's our time frame. I think that for practice, it's just helpful to have this kind of a contract settled and put in place on the earlier end of the spring rather than later, just so we have some expectations and can then continue conversations about transition and what that might look like. We, certainly we'll have more information about how to shape that when we've had a workshop and the opportunity to frame that conversation a little more. I thank all of you for your wisdom, just for your sharing some of your experience at your own boards, and for asking the questions that you have and for making the comments that you've shared. Anything else on the chair report and specifically superintendent? Lots of celebrations to plan, lots of transition planning ahead of us. So it'll be a busy year. Thanks to all of you. AMSD, There's been an AMSD meeting already in the new year. I'd like to invite, we have all three of our board members, Ruthie Dallas and Ann Casey and Andrea Keene. Are you all three continuing on AMSD, or is there a change?
I am not.
Okay.
We'll have a new representative from St. Louis Park on the AMSD.
Ruthie?
I'm continuing, but I've always been an alternate. You know, I'm not the designated one, even though I'm at most of the meetings.
You're there. Excellent. And Andrea, are you continuing?
Yep, I'm continuing this year.
Great. So
and I have a report. Yep, I have a report ready for tonight. The January AMSD meeting was the annual legislative session preview, and it was pretty exciting. I think for the first time ever, we had two legislators introduce themselves as legislators who represent Intermediate District 287. So I thought that was really exciting. It's nice to hear that. And I think it was Representative Ginny Cleaborn and our new senator, Senator Ann Johnson Stewart. So that was really exciting to hear. The preview had three sections. The first section was an overview of the AMSD platform priorities, and three AMSD superintendents shared those priorities. The first was Christine Tucci-Osario from North St. Paul, who talked about stabilizing education funding. And then Superintendent Kim Heil of Fridley talked about closing opportunity gaps. And then finally, Mike Redmond from Shakopee talked about reducing mandates, increasing innovation, and also ensuring safe schools. So the slides from all three of those presentations with really great information and graphics, the slides are available on the AMSD website. So I would check that out if you're interested in more details. After the platform discussion, we had some comments from Governor Walz and from Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. So that was really exciting to have both of them present at the meeting. They both acknowledged what has been asked of the public schools and praised the hard work that's required for all that we've accomplished so far. Walz described the upcoming budget as a moral document that he aims to work to fund what is valued by Minnesotans, including children, families, and small businesses. Then Mary Catherine Ricker, our MDE commissioner, shared some brief comments. And the final section was a legislative leadership panel, including Melissa Hortman, our Speaker of the House, Ron Krisha from the House Republican Caucus, Senator Paul Gazelka, the Senate Majority Leader, and Susan Kent, the Senate Minority Leader. And the issues that were discussed in the panel included budget priorities, the proposed constitutional amendment, and disparities related to the opportunity and achievement gaps. And I think that's a pretty brief summary. It was a great meeting.
Mm-hmm. Any questions or comments about AMSD? Thank you, Andrea. In terms of schedule, the schedule is attached to the board packet. I just want to make a brief comment for our new board members and reminder for current board members that there's a board breakfast with local union 2209, which is a teachers and educational assistants union. We have a monthly breakfast, and currently it is virtual, but all board members are invited to attend, and it's just an opportunity for discussion. So the dates are in the board packet. The next one is February 23rd. So if anyone would like to join that breakfast, please let Jeannie know that you would like to be there, and she will send a link. Juanine, any other comments on the board schedule that you'd like to share?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. And then again, for the information of our new board members, when we're able to open up the room again, 287 offers what we call Get Bus opportunities 4 times a year. It's a chance for board members and constituents. This can be legislative representatives, additional board members, and members of your own communities to go to some of our sites and have a presentation about the work that's happening in our schools. It's just the best work as we get to be with students and staff. So I miss those. We're not able to do them right now. It's a great way to get to know 287. So just watch for that. As soon as we're able to offer them again, we'll inform the board. I highly encourage anyone who's able to participate with those sessions. As we finish up for this evening and once around the table, I just want to point out one note from Robbinsdale. Information that was shared in the packet is about board member Sherry Terrell. Sherry was a board member on the Robbinsdale School Board since 2008, and she is no longer continuing as a board member, but there was an article in the, which was this, the local hometown source about Sherry, and also recognizing her many years of service on the District 287 board. So I just want to commend and thank Sherry. I don't know if she's tuned into a meeting, but an opportunity to thank Sherry for her many years of service on 287. Is there anything that anyone would like to share around the table? Crystal, go ahead, please.
It's not so much a share as it is a request, and this may already be in the planning phases for our next meeting, but I would like to have an update and a good rigorous discussion about our learning model and where it is and where we see it going, just to connect back to the first public comment that we heard. I do feel really heavy with the responsibility and feel the feelings and feel the pain that folks are having at this moment as they are seeing their kids not getting what they need. And so I would love to be able to just get more of a real-time update about where we are, since it's been a while since we had our last update, and to be able to just talk about the tough decisions and trade-offs and ambiguity, and to show how heavy of a responsibility that is and how seriously we take it, and to hear what we as a board need to know and what support we can be providing as these decisions are being made. So that's just a request for the next meeting.
Thank you, Crystal. Well said. And Sandy, go ahead.
Thank you, Crystal. And I would just say we do have a plan to bring a recommendation pending any other changes in guidance to the board at the next meeting. So.
Thank you. Any additional items that anyone would like to share for once around the table? So thank you all for your support and service through our organizational meeting and our general meeting this evening. I would like to ask if there is a motion to adjourn.
Seidel, move to adjourn.
Moved by Adam Seidel. Is there a second?
Second, Marty.
Seconded by Heidi Marty. Crystal, would you please call the roll for adjournment?
Andreessen.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keen.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Kuntz.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Mosqueda Jones.
Yes.
Neville.
Yes.
Sam.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Motion carries. With that, we are adjourned. Be well, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Good night.